In CIST 1530 on chapter 4, we're going to look at working with type and gradients. First, we're going to talk about gradients. Gradients are a blend between two or more colors. So these are something that can be used to make it more visually striking when they're applied to different types and typography. For example, the black and white gradient, that can be used to add weight to a title. Green to yellow gradients, they can make for more vibrant headlines that appear to glow. One of the key things is to make sure that your gradient fits in with your design and it fits with your background image. So when you create type in Photoshop, when you create text in Photoshop, it's called live type, which means that these layers can be edited. You see on the screen, I have the word test. Okay, so this is a live type that I have created. We do this by selecting the type tool, clicking and then typing in our text. Now the toolbar that we saw in the top, it offers me a different ways I can insert text. As I have the horizontal type tool with the vertical type tool that I can use to type text either horizontally or vertically. Now when I type in my text, you'll see that a new layer has been created. You notice it's got this T that tells me it's text, and then the input, the value of the text, will be listed as the layer name. Now, layers, or the text layers, they can be transformed just like any other type of artwork in Photoshop. So we can scale these, we can rotate the layers, the text, we can make them skewed, warped, or we can flip them horizontally or vertically. There are a couple panels that you can use in Photoshop. If you come up to Window and come down to the Paragraph panel, this will open up your Paragraph panel. Now this offers the standard paragraph formatting tools. And this includes like margin indents, first line indents, space after, space before paragraphs, and also text alignment. So all of that can be set in the Paragraph toolbox or window. We'll also look at the character panel. You come back to Windows and come to Character. Now you have a lot of different options you can set in here. You can set your font size, your font, any attributes such as regular, bold, italic, whatever is available for that specific font. Set your font size. Two things we're going to talk about in here is tracking and kerning. So tracking and kerning are options in this character panel. That's going to control the space between the letters. So we can use a negative value to bring the letters closer together and a positive value to move the letters further apart. Now when you're tracking type, you select the whole word or the words and then reduce the space or increase the space between the letters evenly. So right here we'll be setting the kerning, and right next to this is setting my tracking. So with this, I can type in a value, or I can use some of the presets, or I can also click on the icon and drag my mouse pointer left right, and you'll see that the values are increasing and decreasing depending on whether I move it left or right. And we'll go down to the negative, we'll see that they've gotten really close together. I'm going to set this back to 0. So that is my tracking. Now, kerning is going to be more specific. Now, with this, I put my cursor between two letters, and that is only going to affect those two letters. So, for example, between the S and T here, when I adjust the kerning, you'll see that the space between those two letters and those two letters are affected with this. So the space is increased between the S and the T, but not through the rest of my word. Now, right now, my text is a live text, which means there's certain things I can't do this. Like I cannot come to my gradient paint tool and paint over this. Right now, as you see, I can't use the paintbrush. It says that my text must be rasterized. Okay, so when I rasterize text, that means I'm converting the top to pixels. So Adobe users also refer to this as changing the live top to outlines. So once something's rasterized, these top outlines don't appear to change, but then they can be manipulated like all other Photoshop artwork can. So because once they're rasterized, these top or outlines are just pixels. One of the advantages of rasterizing your text is that once that um, that text has been rasterized, the font is no longer required to be installed. So you can um, you don't have to worry about the font appearing different in different places on different machines. So a couple ways I can rasterize an image or a font is by clicking on an action that cannot be applied, and it asks me if I want to rasterize this. I click OK, and it'll rasterize it. I can also right-click in my Layers panel and come up to Rasterize Top. You'll see then I have these transparent pixels. So each new layer that's created in Photoshop is automatically going to be placed on a transparent layer. This is, you'll see as the gray and white chalkboard or checkerboard, this is how you're seeing the transparent layer. Now, a couple things on this. With this layer, I can lock the transparency on the layer. If I come over to the Layers panel, you'll see under Lock that I have another checkerboard that allows me to lock the transparent pixel, so I cannot change those. For example, using my paintbrush and the color of black, right now, if I paint, you see that the paint has been applied to the transparent pixels. Well, I can lock these transparent pixels, and it allows me now to only paint those pixels that have not been locked. So even though I start out here, so it allows me to further customize my text as I can then give it the example of the paint brush going over the text and give it a new look and new design without painting all the transparent pixels. So another advantage of rasterizing your text is that the live top cannot be, they can only be filled with solid colors. It cannot be filled with a gradient. Whereas let me unlock this. Text that's been rasterized can be filled with a gradient. Now you see up here, I do have a gradient box where I can choose different options. So these are preset gradients I can use. I can also, now this is going to use the gradient tool. When I do this, I need to make sure that I have the correct layer selected. For example, if I want it in my text, but I have the background layer selected, and it's unlocked. You see it's going to apply to that background layer. So you want to make sure you have the correct layer selected. And you'll see that even now, the image has changed completely using the gradient tool. The reason why is because it changed my transparent pixels. You'll see that the white is still white. It only applied to this layer, but because I had the transparent pixels unlocked, it applied it to every pixel that is on that layer. So if I wanted to use the gradient tool and only appear to my text, I would want to make sure I lock those pixels. So now when I apply the gradient, you'll see that it only applies to the text, not to all the transparent pixels. You can also add layer styles, and these can be applied to text and rasterized type. With these, when you apply the layer styles, you can double click, left click in the blank area to bring up your layer style dialog box. You can also click the FX and choose the options here, or just click blending options. Now in here, a couple of these we'll look at. We'll look at the bevel and emboss. All right, so this is a layer style that you can use to create classic effects, such as raised text or chiseled text. You have different styles that you can choose, different techniques that can be applied, the depth, the size, directions. All of these are different attributes you can apply to your bevel and emboss to give you a unique look on your text. Another effect we can look at is the stroke. This is a basic artistic element. It's going to place an outline of an object or a top. So the best method for applying the stroke is to apply it as a layer style, as we just did. There are other ways you can apply a stroke. For example, I can duplicate this layer. Then I'm going to use Control T to transform it. And up in the option bar, I'm going to transform this to 0.08. It's going to make it just a little bit bigger. I'll hide this. Reorder these. So you see I've got just a little bit of an outline. Now with this, I can adjust this. And if I wanted to spend the time on it, I could eventually make a stroke for this. It's really easier and more efficient just to use the layer styles. And once again, you can adjust the size, you can adjust the position of the layer stroke, a blending mode, and also choose the different colors that you want to apply to the stroke. Now the gloss and contour, these can be added to layer styles. For example, in the bevel and emboss, we'll look at the contour. So I have different contours I can choose through here. These are 12 pre-set adjustments. And you'll see how they change the effect. So, and then you can adjust these even further to fit the need of your design. The global lot option, as you'll see in the option here, the check to use global lot. This exists as a simple solution to help maintain a consistent light source for multiple layer styles. So using the global lot, when it's checked, all your layer styles will create individual effects using the light from the same direction. Now you can turn this off and manually set the angle and the altitude of the lot located here. And you can drag those. And you see I can adjust this and how it affects the image underneath. One of the great things about Photoshop, it does give you the live preview when you're applying layer styles. A couple things you can do with this is you can create a double emboss effect. So if I want to create 2 layers of this text. Now what this is, double emboss effect, this is achieved by creating the 2 copies of the text. You have one copy is going to have an outer bevel, and the other is going to have the inner bevel. So we'll see here, when we add the layer styles, I'm going to add a bevel and emboss. This one I'm going to add the inner, I'll add the outer. And on this one here, we'll add the inner. So as an example, just a quick example of what a double emboss effect would look like. You would definitely want to tweak the settings that of what I have here to get it more visually appealing. Now, a gradient's a blend of 2 or more colors. So often gradients between the 2 colors are going to create a third distinct color. When you're drawing a gradient, where you click on the screen, that's going to determine where the gradient begins, and where you drag to is going to determine the length of the gradient. And where you release determines where the gradient ends. So let's look at this using our layer 0, our background layer. And I'm going to use the gradient tool. And you'll see some different options up here. I can set the different colors. We're going to use the blue. We can set different attributes, whether we want a linear, radial. So we see that the radial gives us that different color here. Where linear will give us more of the linear color. Let's go with a red because this will be the more dramatic look of these. So we can see that while the color is faded from one color to the other, it does give us that different effect, kind of the blend between the 2 colors. Now these can also be applied to text. Once you have rasterized it, or even if you're using text itself. So if I type in new layer text, and apply a layer style to this, is where I can apply the gradients to this. So in the gradient, I have my options here, the blending modes, the opacity. I can choose different gradients. So this is my gradient editor dialog box. This allows me to create a customized gradient or adjust the gradient itself. So I have different presets I can use. Once again, you'll see a live preview on the text when I choose the new gradients. I also can adjust the sliders. I can choose different opacities. I can choose different add stops to this. And adjust the way the gradient is applied. And choose to have it as solid or as noise, smoothness. So all kinds of different options that you have for the gradients that you can work with applying this not only to your text but also to your layers. So with these, let me reset this here. So in the gradient top here, the location text box, that identifies the a second color stop location from left to right. So we can, once again, add gradients. This is the way you can add it to your text along with your options up here can be added. You just cannot use the gradient tool to paint onto text. The top layer has to be changed to rasterized text. All right, next we're going to look at clipping images. For this, we'll look at this Japan postcard. So as you see, we have the text of Japan, and inside of that, we're now putting images inside each letter. So we look at our layers panel. I'm going to turn off all of these. So this will be our final results. And I'm going to release these clipping masks. So if we're looking at our image like this, we'll see that this is what we're going to work with. So we have our text of Japan. Now to put these in there, I want to right click in the layers panel, and I'm going to come up to create clipping mask. Now what that does, it clips it into the layer directly below it. So we'll just do this for each one. Now there's a couple options. You'll see that these have layer mask applied to them. It's not something that's really necessary because you can still adjust these images. You see that they have the layer mask that's removing this area. But you can still use your move tool and place the image exactly where you want to in the clipped text. So creating clipping mask allows you to create a really unique visual. But once again, that is something that still can be manipulated, and you can use your move tool to readjust your images as you see fit.